The Honourable Member for Newton North Delta.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, today it's my pleasure to speak to this Opposition Day motion because after over a month away from this place, spent almost exclusively in my beautiful riding of Newton North Delta, I heard from my constituents over and over again, and there was a pattern. And the pattern is that they are very, very worried about the harmful effects of this Conservative government's economic mismanagement. Mr. Speaker, our economy is damaged. Middle-class families are working harder than ever, yet falling further behind. The people of Surrey want to know, where are the police this government promised our community in 2006? They want to know why they have so much difficulty bringing siblings and parents into Canada to say goodbye to dying relatives and attend their funerals. They want to know why this government made cuts to literacy when half of the adult Canadian population right now does not have sufficient literacy skills to read the prescription on a bottle of pills. They want to know why community groups fear closure and loss of services to the most vulnerable because this government doesn't bother to inform them whether their skills link funding is going to be renewed. They want to know why it will be 5 years before they can get a hearing on their appeal before the Social Security Tribunal. They want to know why this government hasn't yet fixed the temporary foreign worker program. They want to know why this government is doing nothing to make daycare more affordable for families. They want to know why this Conservative government is pushing an income-splitting scheme that would give billions to the wealthy few and absolutely nothing to more than 85% of Canadian families. And honestly, Mr. Speaker, I'd love to know too. I love representing Surrey and North Delta here in Parliament. And right now, Mr. Speaker, I'm hurting for my constituents. Too many constituents in my riding are struggling to make ends meet. Income inequality in our country is spiraling out of control. The incomes of the top 1% have been surging for decades. It's embarrassing, Mr. Speaker. While the typical Canadian family has seen their income fall over the last 35 years, Mr. Speaker, how is that fair? High levels of income inequality and slow growth have hurt communities like Surrey, Newton and North Delta. And it actually prevents millions of Canadians from achieving their full potential. It's no surprise, sadly, that when the data is examined, 94% of the increase in inequality over the last 35 years occurred under the federal Liberal governments. This Conservative government and the Liberal governments that preceded it have taken our country in the wrong direction. Billions of dollars of cuts to social programs by Liberals and Conservative governments have made things worse by reducing services to all Canadians. Mr. Speaker, the NDP's motion today calls for this Conservative government to release an economic update. Canadian taxpayers deserve an honest account of how the drop in the price of oil has impacted the state of this country's finances. Mr. Speaker, budgets are about making choices, and this Conservative government has chosen to make cuts at every turn, cuts to programs and services that Canadians rely on. This government has also gutted Canada's fiscal capacity to help families in need through tough times. Meanwhile, it's worth noting they are proceeding with reckless handouts to the wealthiest Canadians. Mr. Speaker, the NDP wants an economy that is fair to the middle class. We want a budget that focuses on diversifying the Canadian economy rather than putting all our eggs in one basket. We find it wasteful to spend hundreds of millions of dollars on government advertising to advance our political party's interest. Just last week, I submitted a letter to the Advertising Standards Council asking them to investigate this government's apprenticeship ads. We find it wasteful to spend tens of millions a year on an unelected, unaccountable, and under-investigation Senate. And we find it wasteful to give away billions in subsidies to oil companies and handouts to the most profitable corporations. Former Parliamentary Budget Officer Kevin Page said recently, in the last 10 years, we have virtually made no progress on all our big issues, long-term economic challenges. We have not closed innovation gaps in our country, dealt with an aging demographic that will put pressure on healthcare, nor dealt with environmental sustainability. We have not even had the discussion or proposals from this government. Mr. Speaker, while I and my New Democrat colleagues continue to roll out concrete proposals to support working and middle-class Canadians, the Liberals are continuing to cower, with no ideas to propose, just the same old feeling of entitlement to power. New Democrats have a plan for the middle class, including a $15 minimum wage and childcare that costs no parent more than $15 a day. We are ready to make the economy work for average, hard-working Canadians, not just the rich few. We have a practical plan that repairs the damage this government has done to our social programs, our environment, and our economy. Mr. Speaker, I came to this country in my early 20s with very little. I started to teach immediately, and I have not stopped working yet, many, many years later. I know what it is to work hard, and I know the anxiety and stress that surround job losses, serious illnesses, and precarious employment within families. And, Mr. Speaker, under this government and previous Liberal governments, too many families have lived through this kind of stress. Mr. Speaker, not only do I have the immense privilege of representing people of Newton North Delta, I am also very proud to act as an opposition critic for employment and social development. In this capacity, I see firsthand, on an almost hourly basis, the impact this government's fiscal mismanagement has had on Canadians all over the country. This Conservative government has driven down both wages and reduced support for unemployed Canadians through cuts to EI, a fund most Canadians pay into, and only about 4 in 10 can now access it. This government expanded the temporary foreign worker program, even though youth unemployment numbers are at an all-time high, and has failed to fix it, and has totally ignored the importance of keeping current labour market information. They have introduced a job creator tax cut that only creates 800 jobs at a cost of $500 million. Mr. Speaker, help me wrap my head around that one. In real terms, Mr. Speaker, the average minimum wage in Canada has increased by just 1% over the last 40 years. Does this government honestly believe that someone who works 40 hours a week should be left living below the poverty line? Because without action to boost minimum wages for workers in federal jurisdictions, that is essentially what this government is telling us. Mr. Speaker, what do we tell our youth about this government? What do I tell young graduates who can't get a job? What do I tell someone who didn't even have a job application considered because it was cheaper for the employer to use this government's temporary foreign worker program? Mr. Speaker, I would like to be able to tell them something. I would like this government to vote in favour of our Opposition Day motion and immediately present an economic and fiscal update to Parliament that outlines the state of this nation's finances in light of the unstable economic situation, including job losses, falling oil prices, and declining government revenues. Further, we are asking this government to prepare a budget that addresses the economic challenges faced by the middle class by creating more good quality, full-time jobs and encouraging economic diversification. Mr. Speaker, despite poor economic forecasts by others, the Conservatives continue to claim they will achieve a balanced budget. We're asking for a fiscal update. We want to make sure that their agenda does not get achieved on the backs of hard-working Canadians. Clearly, the Conservative government is conflicted because ministers cannot even agree, even amongst themselves, as to how they're going to be able to face the challenges. The mixed messaging only continued as the Finance Minister and the Minister of Employment and Social Development explicitly put forward 2 different agendas. Mr. Speaker, I would like to finish with a very brief quote from Kevin Page when he said, "When you're spending somebody else's money, you need to show them the plan. When you're spending someone else's money, that plan needs to be scrutinized, and that's okay. That's just good fiscal management. Give us the plan.